Okay, so today we are talking about Nebula. And the idea behind Nebula is to make it simpler and easier for you to manage your customers' networks, to deploy new networks, etc. So Nebula has actually been around for quite a while. It launched all the way back in 2016 and is considered the first full stack cloud networking solution that was designed for the SMB space. Back in those days, the primary player was Cisco's Meraki. There was also Aerohive and a couple others, and they were really heavily focused on the enterprise space. And we looked at that and we saw the benefits that cloud management brought to the networking space, and realized that it would be a great benefit not just for enterprises, but for smaller MSPs, smaller VARs, et cetera, as well. So we decided to create products designed to target that space, and we've been constantly expanding Nebula and improving on Nebula ever since. So the makeup of Nebula itself, you've got the hardware, the switches, the security gateways, the access points. But the heart and soul of Nebula is the cloud-hosted portion here called Nebula Control Center. So we run Nebula Control Center. It is hosted on Amazon AWS. So it has very good uptime. Very, very rarely is there any downtime with it. And that's where you're going to go to manage your customers. So you just log into nebula.zyxel.com and everything is right there. So you've got one URL for all your customers and all of their networks. We also have a mobile app. The mobile app, though, is aimed primarily at just providing an overview of what's going on the networks. There are some very basic configuration options on the mobile app. But its main use is for installers. And we'll get to that in a little bit here and how you add devices into Nebula. And the easiest way to do it is using the Nebula mobile app. So this is just showing you here, this is the typical stuff that goes into what you need to buy, what you need to configure, and the time you're spending on it. When you're setting up a network for a new customer, you've got to buy the equipment, you've got to take it on site, you've got to configure it on site, you need monitoring equipment, you need to figure out how to get remote access, where are the logs being stored, et cetera, et cetera. So Nebula has been designed to remove some of these things that you normally would need to do. And for those where we don't remove it, to make it simpler and take less time for you. So there's no local configuration of the hardware. You simply plug it in. That's all you need to do. The Nebula Cloud itself handles remote management. So there's no, port forwarding or VPN connections to be able to get onto the network. Logs are stored in the cloud, so you don't need monitoring stuff. We can send you notifications, et cetera, et cetera. So now we'll talk about some of the core features here that are part of Nebula. So up and running in minutes. If you're setting up a new customer's site or org, at any point you can log into the Nebula interface and choose to create a new customer or a new network site, et cetera, and just go in there. A lot of the very basic default settings we have already set up in there. So devices will be able to connect to the internet and get online without you needing to really manually configure anything except for maybe your WAN settings on your gateway. But basically, you just plug in the equipment, it reaches out to the cloud, it downloads its configuration, and away it goes. So you can start configuring things without needing to actually take any product out of the box. Many of your site and hardware configuration options can be configured at any point, even before you've finalized which hardware you're going to use, as long as you know it's going to be the Nebula version of it. And then once you do get the hardware, you use the mobile app, and there is a QR code on the outside of the box. You simply scan the QR code on the outside of the box and assign it to your customer and to whichever site, if they have multiple sites, the device is going to. And that's all you need to do. You can now configure everything on that device in the cloud without needing to plug it in or take it out of the box. So scan it, configure it in the cloud while you're waiting for it to be shipped and received at the installation location. So Nebula is built into our hardware. The agent is hosted in the hardware itself. So there's nothing else you need to do. So there's no additional hardware like cloud keys that you would need. There is no configuration of the devices to point them to the cloud. There is no software that needs to be run or a virtual machine that needs to be set up anywhere. We're hosting the cloud, and our hardware can reach out and find the cloud on its own. And basically, It's all done through the Nebula website, nebula.zyxel.com. So anywhere you've got an internet connection and a web browser, you have access to all of your customers and all of their networks. So no matter where you are, it's easy to get on there and fix something if one of your customers calls you up with a request or an issue. Nebula has a bunch of flexibility when it comes to guest access. So this is whether we're talking about, a cafe or a small hotel, or we're talking about, just a typical office where you may have vendors or customers visiting who need to get onto the internet. So Captive Portal is built in on our access points, and it is built in on our gateways. So you can use either or to provide Captive Portal functionality. We host the page, it's customizable. We've got a very basic editor for changing how the Captive Portal looks, but we do give you the ability to download the HTML and CSS files, modify them to your heart's content, and then re-upload them to Nebula for hosting, or you can always point it to your own server that you've set up and run yourself. And then when it comes to user authentication, we've got a ton of options that are available there for you. We can do your typical terms of service. You just agree to a terms of service and then they get access. We can have it set up so guests have to register their own their email address and a password before they can then log in using that email address and password. We can use Facebook login, etc. So a lot of flexibility when it comes to the Captive Portal features. On the wireless side of things, we support Mesh. We've got a couple different flavors of Mesh that we can use to be able to provide access either to APs that are located someplace you can't bring an Ethernet drop to, or in cases where you have an AP that gets disconnected, it can automatically switch over to mesh mode to get back onto the network. We have support WPA3, including the enterprise flavor, and we support all the industry standards when it comes to roaming. On the switch side of things, using Nebula, we support our intelligent PoE technology, which frees up a lot more of your PoE budget based on actual utilization. We've got the ability to set up ACL rules, VLANs, 802.1x authentication, DHCP server guard, etc., and the ability to virtually stack your switches. So with Nebula, all configuration is done through the cloud. You don't need to connect to a device directly and be able to configure it. As long as you have DHCP running at the location, at least at the time of setup, there's nothing that you need to do on the hardware itself. It will automatically find out that you want to manage it in the cloud and put itself into cloud management mode. This also applies for firmware updates. That's all done through the cloud over the air for you. And then on the security side of things, we do have some features here to make VPN functionality a little bit easier to set up and configure, specifically site-to-site VPNs, very easy to do with Nebula Cloud. And then when it comes to setting up IPsec, over L2TP over IPsec, we have the ability to email out scripts that can configure iOS, Macintosh OS, and Windows clients. So Nebula was designed from the ground up with the idea that you'll have one interface, one place to go. All of your customers are there. All of their networks are there. So we make it really easy to see what's going on. You choose one of your customers and you'll get a list of all of their sites, assuming they have multiple sites, and a quick snapshot of the health of the site. You can make a visual representation of where that site is using Google Maps integration. And then once you choose the site you want to manage, it takes you to this dashboard here. We make it really easy to jump from the dashboard from one site to a different site, or from one of your customers to a different customer, just using pull-down menus. Drop down the pull-down menu, choose the customer or the site you want to go to, and it'll automatically take you there. The widgets that are displayed here on your landing page, these are customizable, which ones are there, so you can see just the ones that you care about and hide the rest. And all of your management is done from the menu here on the left-hand side. So here's an example here of connected Wi-Fi devices. This is one of the real-time graphs that we have here for you. And you can see here we plot out over time utilization of the wireless network. And then we also have the ability to display information about the clients. And again, which columns are here is fully up to you, but you can show things like, is the user currently connected, or is this somebody who was connected and is disconnected? What type of device it was, what channel they were on, what their signal strength is, et cetera, et cetera. On the switches, we have a similar view. So you can see again, bandwidth utilization over time on that wired network. You also have a nice visualization of the switches that are on the network currently and what's going on with them. Based on color code there, you can see whether Ethernet is plugged into them and what speed that connection is. You can also see if that port is currently providing PoE to an attached device or not. And then when it comes to configuration, you simply select the ports you want to configure. You can do that across multiple switches at the same time. And then it pulls up here a nice, simple, clean, easy to use interface for putting in VLAN information or other settings you may want to configure. So now a key thing here when it comes to Nebula is Nebula and everything, just about everything I've talked about here on these green slides is free, part of the free solution. So Nebula does not require any licensing to be able to use it. And the free version of Nebula has no limitations to the number of devices you can manage in the cloud and has no limitation to the number of customers you can manage. Now, we do also offer some licenses, and we will talk about them later, that are optional, but the core functionality of Nebula and the core functionality of all the hardware is part of the free solution when it comes to Nebula. So I want to talk a little bit about the term Nebula Flex. So back when we first launched Nebula back in 2016, we copied the Meraki way of doing things, where we had versions of our hardware which were for local management and versions of the hardware that were for the cloud. Since then, we've moved away from that, and now basically everything is what we call Nebula Flex. So one piece of hardware, and you have the flexibility to manage it your traditional way by accessing it directly, or the ability to manage it in the clouds. You choose either or, and at any point you can switch back and forth between the two. But do keep in mind that configurations in the cloud don't carry over when you switch modes. So you will need to reconfigure it or have a backup from before, but you can switch back and forth. So if you move the device from one customer who's using the cloud to another customer site who doesn't use the cloud, you can still just switch modes on that hardware. And then we have something called Nebula Flex Pro. Same thing. The only real difference here is this comes bundled with one of our optional Nebula licenses, the Nebula Pro Pack. So if you buy a device that's Nebula Flex Pro, it comes with 1 year Nebula Pro Pack license that you can use. And then when it comes to our access points, it's a little bit different with access points. You also get on there, in addition to the cloud management, in addition to the Pro Pack license, in addition to standalone management, is the ability to use a local controller to manage those APs. So if you're looking for APs to manage with a local controller, you want to buy something that's labeled as Nebula Flex Pro. This is just showing you here sort of a breakdown of most of our product lines, which ones are Nebula Flex, which ones are Nebula Flex Pro. So Nebula Flex, when it comes to our access points, are all models from the 50 series, the 100 series, 200 series, and 1000 series. When it comes to our switches, it's the GS1920V2, the XS1930, and the XGS1930. And then on our security gateways, it is the USG Flex series, which does not have the UTM services bundled with it, just the standalone version there. On the Nebula Flex Pro side of things, it's going to be our access points that are 500, 600, 5000, and 6000 series. So those will all come bundled with 1 year Pro management and also support working with a local controller. On the switch side of things, it is our 1350 series, the 2220 series, and the 3800s. And then when it comes to the security gateways, if you buy a USG Flex that is bundled with UTM services, it will also include 1 year of Pro Pack as part of that bundle that you could use. And then our ATP series, the gold versions, which is how they're sold out of the box. If you have a gold license, it also includes Nebula management if you want to use it. So now let's talk a little bit more about the optional licenses that are available. So there's the free version of Nebula, which we call the base pack, which all devices support. And then we have these optional licenses here, the Plus or the Pro Pack. The Plus is designed to compete with offerings by, say, TP-Link or Netgear, where the Pro Pack is a much more full-featured license that's aimed more at your MSPs. If you're looking to provide more MSP-type services, competing with people such as Cisco, Meraki, or Ruckus's cloud offerings. So Plus is cheaper, Pro is more expensive, and we'll get into here in a slide and some of the differences between the three versions. Now, one key thing to keep in mind is that licenses, in order to upgrade from the free version of Nebula to Plus or Pro, every device in the organization, so every device in that customer, as you've got it configured in Nebula, needs to have a valid license. So if you've got 20 devices and you only add 20 devices and you only add 15 licenses, it will not change over to the Plus or Pro pack. All 20 devices will need a valid Plus license or a valid Pro license for the Nebula interface to switch and unlock those extra features. If at any point one of your licenses expires, you will be given a notification, and you will, before it expires, and even after it expires, we will give you a 15-day open window before we degrade your network. But we will then degrade the network back down to the free version until you've added licenses for every device that is on that customer's account. So now going on here to what is available in these different versions. So basically, all versions of Nebula, the free or the paid versions here, give you access to that plug and play configuration, cloud management of an unlimited number of devices, an unlimited number of customers, access to the dashboard, location map, floor planning, et cetera, et cetera. All versions will let you update the firmware over the cloud and allow you to do basic scheduling of those firmware updates. All versions get you access to the apps. All versions get you access to all the core features and configurations on the different hardware itself. So here's one of the first areas where we've got some differences when it comes to the log information. So we store the logs in the cloud automatically. So the free version of Nebula only gets you 24 hours worth of logs. Plus Pack keeps a week's worth of logs in the cloud, and Pro Pack keeps a year's worth of logs in the cloud. Now, we do also support syslog, so you can always, if you need more storage of your logs than 24 hours, but you don't want to pay for the Plus or Pro Pack, you can always have it export the logs to a syslog server that you run. The next area here we've got some differences is when it comes to the number of admin accounts per customer. So with the free version of Nebula, you can have up to 5 different admin accounts per customer account in the cloud. Plus Pack gets you 8. Pro Pack gets you an unlimited number. We also have a cloud database. So this cloud database is used for DPPSK. It is also used for things like 802.1x authentication, MAC filtering if you want to use it for that. So if you are using the cloud server there, the free version of Nebula is limited to just 50 entries in that database. Plus Pack gets you 100 entries in that database, and Pro Pack gives you an unlimited number of amount. But of course, we also still support Radius for most of those features. So Radius, you can use Radius for as many accounts as you want. It's only if you're using our cloud database for that authentication where you run up to these limits. All versions of Nebula give you MAC filtering, 802.1x authentication, captive portal features. Now, the free version has something called cloud saving mode. And basically what that is in order to have your logs stored in the Nebula cloud, you do need to log into your Nebula interface at least once a month. If you don't log in for 30 days, it will stop gathering logs until you log in and tell it to start gathering log information again. So now we'll talk about some features here that are exclusive and do require that you have one of these 2 optional licenses. So the first one here is advanced firmware scheduling. This allows you to create different rules for when the firmware updates are done based on the type of device, or allowing you to set up rules for each individual device independently. Advanced reporting functionality. So we have the ability in the Nebula interface to set up all sorts of different reports and have those automatically emailed out on a schedule. And you do have the ability to add your logo and brand information onto those emails. So it's a good way to provide updates to your customers if you're providing managed services, so they can get a weekly or monthly report of what's gone on the network, the status of the network, et cetera. We have this automatic topology view where we will generate a graphic showing you which devices are connected to which other devices, which may be helpful for troubleshooting issues on your network. The ability to get email and push alerts, that does require the Plus or Pro pack. And then something called Wi-Fi vouchers. So if you're doing like commercial hotspot, where you want people to pay at a cash register and then be given a account to log in with that coincides with a certain amount of time, that does require either the Plus or the Pro pack. And then going on from there, Pro pack exclusive features. These are primarily, again, MSP type features. In addition to keeping logs in the cloud, we have an audit log where we track who makes configuration changes and what those changes are. We have the ability to be able to sync different sites together or use templates or clone existing sites. So when you're creating new ones, you can simplify things by cloning what was already there, or you can use the templates to change certain settings across multiple sites simultaneously. The ability to back up and restore configuration files for some of your devices. The ability to open up a ticket directly with Zyxel's headquarters. If you're having any sort of issues with Nebula, that requires the Pro pack. Advanced Wi-Fi AAA services, that requires the Pro pack for something like, say, infinite Wi-Fi if you want to work with their services. If you want to use dynamic pre-shared key, you do need to use the Pro pack. Advanced Wi-Fi controls. This is sort of like an AI type thing we do, or you can manually set these settings to try to give you more control over what's going on your wireless network. Advanced switch features, things like port-based bandwidth control, static routing, things like that. If you're using our 1350 series of switches, you do need the Pro pack to unlock those additional special IPTV features. The ability to do captive packet captures directly through a security gateway through the cloud is something that requires it. So this is just showing here one of the things I talked about briefly there is we have the ability to use artificial intelligence technology to automatically make tweaks to your AP settings based on what we see based on client behavior. So that's part of Pro pack there for you. If you're doing IPTV, Pro pack unlocks some additional IGMP snooping configuration features that aren't normally available. And it also generates some reporting where our switches in Nebula itself can recognize drop packets, channels taking too long to switch channels, things like that, and can tell you what settings we think you should change to solve those issues. Here's that automatic topology view where we map out each device on the network so you know what's connected to what. So that's it for talking about these device licenses. There is another type of license here. This is an account license. This is a license you would buy per admin account that you want to have these features. Doesn't have to be all your admin accounts. Most of our customers who are doing this are going to be MSPs, and they normally just put it on 1 or 2 accounts. And this is our MSP pack. So the MSP license, the primary benefit here of it is going to be giving you access to what we call the MSP Portal. It's basically a snapshot view that shows you all of the clients that you're managing and gives you a snapshot view of which ones are using the free version of Nebula, which are using one of the paid subscriptions, when those subscriptions expire, any devices that are offline, etc. So that's a new view you get. Then some of the other features it unlocks for you is you can remove the Zyxel branding from the interface and replace it with your own company's branding. It makes it a lot easier for those MSPs that have a large number of employees to be able to manage admins by giving you what we call teams. So you can set up different teams with different access rights and then simply assign individual admins to those teams and then apply those those teams to different organizations instead of the non-MSP way where you have to do it on a per admin user basis. And the ability to synchronize certain settings across different organizations. And then lastly, it's kind of a cool feature for the MSP license is it allows you to get email reports from all of your customers even if they're using the free version of Nebula. So that's normally a feature that requires a Plus or Pro license on the customer to be able to generate those emails. If you as an admin have an MSP license on your account, you will be able to do that for all of your customers, even those that are using the free version of Nebula. So continuing on for what I'm going to call your more generic UTM security licenses. So these aren't really Nebula licenses. These are just your security licenses that are available. Again, most of our security appliances are Nebula Flex. So you can either use them standalone or you can use them with Nebula. So because of that, we've got different UTM licenses available. If you're using one of our older NSG gateways, you buy the NSS Security Pack. If you're using a USG Flex, you use our UTM Security Pack. If you're using an ATP, you buy a gold license to unlock those UTM features. And the specific UTM features vary based on which hardware it is there and which license you're buying. Then we also have this secure Wi-Fi license, which basically allows you to turn an access point into a remotely managed VPN appliance. So if you've got a lot of remote workers, obviously, remote working is still a very big thing right now. This is an easy way to make it, or an easy way for you to manage VPN access for your users. And make it easy for them to set it up in their homes. You simply give them an access point that you've configured to use the secure Wi-Fi feature, and it creates an SSID that uses 802.1x authentication and can use two-factor authentication before your wireless users can connect to it. But when they connect to it, it essentially creates a VPN tunnel back to the office. So that way you're not having to configure software on their PCs. You're not having to give them a dedicated VPN router, which may end up, being double natted behind whatever sort of gateway they already have from their ISP. You simply give them an access point, they plug it into their existing router, and now they've got an SSID that they can connect to and get access to their work network. And then we've got what's called Connect and Protect. This is a new license we launched this year, and it provides what I'm going to call UTM Lite services on a per access point basis. So it's going to be able to, by using an IP reputation filter, block traffic to spam sources, phishing sites, sites known to host malware, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a license for access points. And it does not have to go onto all of your access points, but any access point where you want this extra security, you would buy the license and apply it to that specific device. So this is for those cases like smaller offices out there where they've got a router or gateway that was provided by their ISP. Maybe it doesn't provide UTM services. Maybe it technically does, but it's managed by the ISP and they don't have access to get in there. So it allows them to provide some extra security to their wireless users. And in many cases, you would only provide this, say, on a public area, right? You've got a network. Maybe you only want to apply this to your guest network and not to, say, the warehouse network or something like that. And you can do that because you simply buy the license and add it to the APs that you want to have this extra functionality. So when it comes to Nebula here, we want you to play with it if you haven't had a chance to yet. There is a demo. You simply go to nebula.zyxel.com, and there is a demo site that you can choose to log into that's live, so you can play around with it there. And if you're one of our reseller partners who's part of the partner program, you can talk to your salesperson and see about getting a 60-day demo kit for your own lab, which includes some different Zyxel hardware, so you can test it out and play with it yourself. And with that, guys, we're done with today's presentation. So if you've got any questions, send those in with the question and answer interface. While we're waiting for those, just to let you guys know, almost all the webinars we put out are recorded and then uploaded to our YouTube page. For North America, our YouTube channel is Zyxel America channel. So that's the one you want to go to be able to find any past webinars that we've done. Today's should be getting uploaded there by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. And then we are also on LinkedIn, so feel free to link up to us there at Zyxel US channel. I am not seeing any questions coming in. I'll stall here for another few seconds, but thank you everybody who turned out today. I appreciate you spending the time listening to me. We have a lot of other webinars that we're doing. I think we're probably going to be kind of slim over the next couple of weeks because of the holidays, but starting in January, we'll have a bunch again. I cover stuff like our wireless products, Nebula covers our security gateways and switches. And then for more in-depth presentations, Marcus puts those on where we talk about things like, how do I configure this? How should I set up that? What are best practices? And then also the sales guys can put stuff up too. So if you need a different training or you have some ideas for webinars you think we'd like, reach out to your salesperson and let them know so they can pass that up the chain. So anonymous attendee is asking again where to find those previous webinars. So it's YouTube, and our YouTube channel is Zyxel America channel. And that's because we're a global company and each different region has their own YouTube channel. So for those North America's presentations, it's also where you can find some video case studies and success stories, some other information like that. Again, it's just going to be on YouTube. Just search for Zyxel America channel. Officially, there's no spaces there, but if you put the spaces in, it'll still come up. And that's where everything's going to be stored at. And with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. Thanks for joining us. If there's anything else you've got or any questions pop up later, just reach out to your salesperson and they can get those answers for you.